Welcome to my video on how to take advantage of each and every phase in the real estate cycle. In my last video, I talked about the 4 different phases, which are the peak, the recession, the recovery, and the expansion. If you did not check out that video, I urge you to check it out somewhere up in this area. It'll be up there. Anyway, go back and check that out because it talks about the different phases. In this one, we're going to be talking about, like I said, how to take advantage, what strategies to invest in each and every different phase to make some lovely cold hard cash. Also, to expand your net worth and explode through any and all goals that you have. In order to be a long-time investor in the real estate market, you're most likely going to have to adapt or just outright change what you invest in and how. Very few strategies are good through all 4 phases. So let's jump into the very first phase. We're going to start with peak, just like I did in my last video. Now, as I mentioned in my previous video, I feel like peak is one of the most riskiest phases to invest in. You either want your investment to be very short, like a wholesale deal, or you want to figure out how you can keep it long term before you get into the tail end of the recovery or the expansion phase where you can sell it again for a good profit. And while I say this is the most riskiest time to invest, don't get that confused with you should not invest, because what I'm trying to tell you is that you need to be very cautious in this phase, but deals are still around. Now in this phase, if you're a flipper, you're going to want to buy properties in the best areas, the best schools. You want to appeal to the biggest pool of buyers. So I'm going to say eliminate really high-end flips because you're narrowing your pool of buyers. Also, make sure that you're buying your properties right and you have a good margin from where you bought it to where it's worth. That way, if the market turns on you, you can easily unload this property at a break even at the very worst. For you buy and hold investors out there, in this phase, finding value add property is darn near impossible. They're still out there, but you're having to put a ton of effort into finding deals. What this does is it gets people to end up overpaying or buying deals that they shouldn't. I want to stress the importance, and I cannot stress this enough. Stress test your deals. I said stress a ton of times, but seriously, stress test your deals. Make sure that they will be able to perform in the next 2 phases coming up, because you need to be ready for lower rents and also higher vacancy. You'll want to make sure, and I'm going to recommend at this point, if you're doing rentals, that you can have higher vacancy, so double your vacancy, and reduce your rents by 10%. And if you can't still make your payments to the bank, that's probably not a good deal for you. And if it's not a good deal, pass on it. So much better to not buy a deal than to buy the wrong deal. I'm also going to recommend to be very cautious with A-class property. This is the top of the market property. There's no value add to put into it. It's getting the highest rents. Be very cautious with that, because the A renters in the rough times, they're going to move out and go into B, maybe even C-class properties to start saving on some of their expenses in the recession, which is the next phase. Also in this phase, I would highly recommend for you buy and hold people to look into student housing. Did you know that student housing in a recession actually has higher enrollment? If you're a private lender at this point, I'm going to recommend that you be very cautious of short-term deals, and you're going to want to make sure that whoever you're lending that to has stress tested it. On top of that, you want to make sure that they have multiple exit strategies. And I'll dive into that a little bit more in a video just on itself. But essentially what that means is if you cannot do what you originally planned, so if you were going to flip this house, you're going to fix it up and sell it, and if you cannot sell it without taking a loss, Maybe your second strategy is that you can have that as a rental and hold on to it until another phase when the market returns back. If you're a wholesaler, well, you can make money no matter what phase you're in, as long as you realize what phase you are in. A lot of times you're going to see flippers end up turning into wholesalers because they can't make it at flipping at this point. The margins are so thin. But being a wholesaler, as long as you can adapt to the different phases, smooth sailing. So next up is the recession phase. The recession phase is the correction from the inflated prices from the previous phases that we had been in. A lot of people are going to think that this is the worst time to invest, but there are still fantastic deals to be found. You just have to look for them and know where you're at. Maybe risky. You may buy a property and the value may go down a little bit, but if you've planned for that and you're going to hold on to it for a while, this is a great time to find some great deals. More than likely at this point, the rates have been raising from back in the peak phase on up through the recession. The government is trying to fight inflation from that market, so your rates are going to be inflated. You're going to see bank-owned properties. You're going to see auction properties increase. So this is a great time to find those auctions, network with banks, find those properties because they don't want to own them. They want to sell them. And if you have a relationship with them, a lot of times you can get a deal before it even hits the market. Now, the recession is a time, probably the best time to buy land, because back in the peak phase, a lot of the construction companies have just dried up. They're sitting on the sideline waiting for the bottom of the market. So right now, no one's buying land. So if there's a piece of property that you want to buy, now's the time to do it. Now at this point, you may want to shift your business or add in a section of creating turnkey properties for investors, buying them low, fixing them up, and selling them either empty or rented to other investors. This is can be a great time, and we'll talk about this in the next phase, but in the recession and in the recovery is great times to start those business, work through all the kinks. If you have some other great investing ideas for each of these phases, comment below. I'd love to see some creative ideas, and don't forget to hit that like button. It definitely helps out the YouTube algorithm and gets more people to see my videos. I greatly appreciate it. So the next phase is the recovery, and this is pretty much the rock bottom. Prices have pretty much leveled off, and you won't really see much deviation lower from those prices at this point. There is still a risk of it, so be cautious still what you buy. So as I mentioned in the recession phase, hopefully you were able to start some connections with banks, learn the auction process, because right now, wholesalers, flippers, buy and hold people, this is a fantastic time to start picking up property at all of those places. Even on the MLS, deals are abundant for every investor on the market. And because there are so many deals around right now, it's the perfect time to scale your business. Maybe you've been holding off hiring someone to come into the business. Maybe you just need someone to pick up some of those small tasks that you don't like to do. And now's the perfect time. Now's a great time to be a note investor. And that is when you're buying loans that are typically non-performing at this point. And you can buy these sometimes 40, 50 cents on the dollar and either get it performing, so get that person to start paying, or you can take back the property, fix it, flip it, wholesale it, whatever you want to do with it, smack it up, flip it, and rub it down. No. Oh no. Also, the recovery phase is the best time to buy for appreciation. We are at rock bottom prices, so buying that property, looking for it to appreciate, is a fantastic time. I'm in the Midwest, so we don't see the huge swings, but on the East Coast, West Coast, those high desirable areas, this is a fantastic time to buy. This goes for single family, multifamily, even commercial. But commercial property typically has its own cycle, so you want to make sure that you're following the right cycle to buy commercial property. So this is also a phase that is perfect to buy multifamily. The valuations for these properties are at rock bottom. The problem is that lending is not very conducive to buy property at this point. So it's going to be harder for you to get investors, lenders, banks on board to buy these properties. Even though it's the perfect time, people shrink up and they don't want to buy. And as I mentioned in the previous phase, this is the perfect time to start that turnkey rental property business. Maybe you started in the previous one, but if you haven't, maybe you were gearing up for it, now's the time to do that. The investors are coming at the end of this phase into the next phase, so be prepared. Now we're on to the fourth phase, which is the expansion phase. This is the bread and butter for any wholesaler or flipper out there because money is abundant. Investors are flocking into the market, so there's a huge pool of buyers. It's harder to find the deals, but it is very easy to make money and sell these deals. You can also even get into those high dollar flips if you want to get into those, because now is the time. Money is easy, and also there's a huge buying pool. Now at the beginning to middle of this phase, it's still a fantastic time to buy some value add multifamily properties and essentially be able to still sell them before the correction happens again. So you may want to set up syndications to bring on passive investors. You may want to find partners at this time, but right now is a great time to get into multifamily if you didn't in the previous phase. If you like your money to make you money, now's the perfect time to lend to wholesalers, to flippers, to put your money into syndications, because appreciation is into full swing. And what that means is that you would normally see a 10 to 15% return on these deals. Sometimes you're making your money back in 2 or 3 years, and after that, it's just gravy money getting poured right into your pocket. If you're a land buyer, now's the time that those contractors are coming back and they want the land. So if you bought it back in a previous phase, now's the time to sell it. You could be getting top dollar for it. So you may want to consider at this point to sell the land that you have. So I've laid out some strategies for you to invest in different phases, and hopefully you've learned quite a bit from this and you learned how to adjust your strategy as you go through each and every phase to be on top of other investors in your competition. If you got some value from this video, please hit that like button, subscribe down below. It helps the YouTube algorithm, and we'll see you in the next video.